Hello everyone and welcome back to the AFL Fantasy Fanatics head-to-head series. We are back for another season. I believe it is season 4 of the series, and we've got plenty of head-to-head combos. We've got probably less than previous years with all the opening round buys and a lot of players in different price points that we're considering and a few locks there. So hopefully we'll still be able to bring you some very relevant players and some key decisions that you guys will be making for your AFL Fantasy Classic teams. I'm your host, Bales, and you can find me at BAILSDT across the socials. And joining me is a special guest, and I feel like this is a tradition. We always get this man on for the very first head-to-head episode of the series. It is the godfather of AFL Fantasy, 1/3 of the traders. It is Warnie from coach of the Warn Dogs. Warnie, mate, how are you? Good to have you back on the head-to-head series.
Great to be here, Bales. If you ask, I'm always willing, mate. Very, very keen for these because the exciting stuff as we think about these head-to-heads, you're making those decisions between players, and hopefully some of this might help people or just probably make you even more confused. Sometimes they do for me.
Yeah, exactly right. And I feel like sometimes you can pick both the players that we do in the head-to-head video. Sometimes you pick none, or sometimes it is that key decision where you do pick one or the other. So we will be starting off with a couple of defenders that we'll be looking at. A lot of value defenders this year that we are considering, but these two players I feel like are almost the two popular players being Colby McKercher and Miles Bergman. So Warnie will be taking Colby McKercher. I'll be taking Miles Bergman. But just quickly give you guys a quick rundown with the two. So Colby McKercher, 823K, 78 average from his 23 games last year, and has an ownership of, and it has not popped up with ownership on my...
He's about 45% or so from memory.
I reckon you might be bang on the money here. So Colby McKercher is 46.73% owned. So very, very highly owned there. And then Miles Bergman is 822K, so 1K cheaper. He averaged the 78 from his games of 19 last year. Obviously, a few injury-impacted games there, 22.59%. So a little bit difference there, but we'll be interested to see how the head-to-head goes. So, Warnie, Colby McKercher this year, why should we be looking at him in AFL Fantasy?
Well, I had to have Colby when you gave me the choice of the two because he is a Tassie boy. He's one of our Lonnie lads, and Calvin was a teacher of him as well. So that's another important part, because if Calvin can teach someone and they've then made it in the world, so there must be some good things about them, because I don't know if Calvin might be the greatest teacher of all time there. Anyway, he did have him. I think some of the stories he's told as well, he did have him for like Mandarin classes, I think. So anyway, yeah, right. Calvin was his teacher, but we're going to look at Colby going into his third year. And so that's always something that we do get excited about, third year breakout, whether we want to say that or call that. But I think he broke out right from the get-go, really. Like, he averaged 82 in his first season. He went in with that cushy sort of half back role that we've seen a few players do early in their careers. Like, it's a bit of a nice start to AFL level footy for players if they can do that. And then last year we saw that he wasn't that. So more wing, bit of half forward. So the role wasn't there for the first half of the season for fantasy. And we actually saw some pretty putrid scoring as well. Like, you look through some of those numbers, like pre the role change, which we'll talk to that in a minute, but there were 20s in there, there were 60s, 50s, a couple of 40s, and so that's why his average is pretty much at that 78 that we see him at for the season, because it was a tale of two halves. And if you do go back through his stats, and I remember this very vividly because it was the mid-season buy that they had, that he may or may not have made a trip to Launceston. There may or may not have been people getting in his ear and finding out what was going on, and was going into they were playing their 2 games in WA straight off the bye. So they're at Hands Oval against West Coast as the first one there, and going into that, we sort of were told that maybe his role had changed, and there might have been 3 blokes that brought him into their side, and a couple of people might have even laughed at that, because considering his previous score to that one was a 40, might have looked a little bit weird, but he did what we heard that he was going to do, and that was move to half back and do that thing again. So we saw he racked up 35 disposals that day. It was ridiculous. And so the old pocket money was a little bit better on that one. I know a couple of other blokes went the 35 line on a betting company, but I wasn't that bullish. Anyway, they did all right with that. So, yeah, he had 35 touches and came in, and a 91 for 35 touches isn't epic when you think of what some players can do with that. But it was all about that role, and he was back there doing his thing. And so that's where we saw him started having those kick-ins again, because he only had 1 kick-in for in those 11 games prior to that. So that's something that was definitely a change, and that helps him boost up those scores. So, from there on, that's where he went. He went at 95 for the rest of the season, even a little bit higher because it was only 64 in the final round that he had. So, but in that time, like, huge scores. There's, the 17 points, really, if you want to call it that, from where he's priced at. That's what he increased there. But from what he did in the first half of the season, it was a pretty significant jump. So I guess that it's all about what we saw last year, but moving forward to this year, what does that role look like? It looks like it's going to be the same thing. So watching last week, their intra-club game, he was doing Colby things. He was on the half back. He was wrapping around for that handball. I reckon a handball receive stat for him would be quite a big one in the league, and they want to use it. He can run. He can do it all. So that's a good thing. Probably the only negative out of that game I saw in that is that Caleb Daniel looks to, he was in the A team and have the mortgage on those kick-ins. So maybe they're not going to be quite there. But at the end of the day, he's priced at that 78. He's got the little, the pig tendencies that he does and the way that he racks up. And that's sort of why I'm all on board. Like, as soon as the game opened, I was pretty confident that's where it was. We saw there was a little bit of that preseason talk saying that, maybe he does get that midfield role. Now, the midfield role wouldn't be so bad. It's just that he hasn't really done that in the past as well. So, like, he's only had one game, I think, over 20% CBAs in his career. And that was actually probably, let me find that one. I had that there before. That was actually the year before. He only scored a 50 in that, but he's only had that one. The rest have all been pretty minimal. So it hasn't been, well, a midfield role isn't going to be great for him, but he hasn't really done it. So I'm not sure that if that's there, a role change is not necessarily going to be that inside mid. It might be that wing. It might be that half forward that we don't want to see, but everything's adding up towards being the half back, at least from the start of the season. We'll see what that looks like. North Melbourne have that fairly nice run to begin with as well, so he should be right. So there's just no reason for me not to pick him. And I think that everyone else is, and he's, getting towards that 50% ownership. I think we should be all on board and hoping for, at a minimum, a 10-point upside, which gets him to the 88. But I think we'd be probably feeling shortchanged if we got anything less than a 90, and to be knocking on the door of those top few defenders.
Yeah, exactly. And you're getting him for a low 800s price tag. And I think the kick-ins in the pracky games is you'd like to see a bit of a split, but I feel like Colby's the guy that if he doesn't get the kick-in, he's going to get the +6 in the pocket. So I think that is okay. I think he was training midfield in some pracky games, but I think you boys talked about early pre-season that you reckon that's just to build up those mid-minutes in the future and give him some exposure so he's not sort of shoved in there early, right? So you see this being a purely half-back, maybe the odd sort of stint, maybe a little bit up the ground, but pretty much majority halfback.
And that's what it is. And I guess their midfield is pretty stacked. I don't know if that's the right thing to say when you're talking about North Melbourne with anything, but it's LDU, it's Shees. Wardlaw had that little bit of a hammy, but he should be right to start the season. And then throwing around there too, watching that intra-club game too. Fino Sullivan had a lot of time in the midfield, so I'm not sure. Colby, and not that I watched it as closely as I could have done, especially I think the first quarter of any intra-club game is about all you need to see, just about of those sorts of things to begin with. But that his role was the halfback, and we're seeing other names that will be floating through there anyway. So I think he's sort of down the pecking order in that, and I think they just want to get his confidence. And that was some of the words that he used actually in that mid-season catch-up that we sort of had with him when they had their buys, that they want to get the ball in his hands to build his confidence, because in that first half of the season, I think only 2 games that he had more than 20 touches in the games, with some pretty low disposal numbers, which isn't him and wasn't him as a junior and wasn't him in his first year of footy either. So, I think string to the bow of any midfield training, but I think the role is certainly, at least to begin with, going to be that half-back.
Yeah. And you could see even in the first part of last year when he was in this forward role, when he got the ball, he'd do stuff with it. But as you say, we would only get it 15, 20 times and just wouldn't have the impact. Whereas off half back, multiple times he'd get the 2-3 disposals and get it inside 50 and would be the one kicking it inside 50. So it's a waste of putting him half forward when he's going to get the same disposal. Might as well put him half back ring, get more of the ball, get it forward, get that run and carry going for North Melbourne. We saw it multiple
and he
times.
uses it. He uses it well. I think that's the other part of it because he's so fast. And if that's what this game's all about now, sort of that line breaking stuff, he's the one.
Yeah, exactly right. Now I'm very keen on Colby this year. Another player I am keen on as well. It feels weird as a Crows fan this year. I'm keen on a number of Port players and not many Crows players. It's not really in my DNA to be like this, but alas, we are here. But Miles Bergman is someone I'm quite keen on this year. So last year, obviously had a defender role for the first part of the year, but if everyone remembers the showdown where he went to Jordan Dawson, tagged him in the midfield, and that was where we started to see the emergence of Miles Bergman. So he scored 112 that day. So he had the 23 touches there, 5 marks, 8 tackles from 85% time on ground, and he had 82% CBA. So that was actually his third highest CBA percentage for the season. So he'd go on to have 36% CBAs, 56%, 60%, 61%. And then there was a game against Sydney with 11%, 89%, 31%, 25%, 83%, then 19% in that game where he got injured against the Crows in that showdown there. So as you could see, sorry, not injured, he played 9% TOG, but he was clearly struggling with that shoulder that he did injure a few games before that. But his role did get thrown around a little bit, even though he did play well. Everyone remembers that game against Geelong where there was like the 10, 15 hamstring injuries they had in the first half combined. He ended up playing in defence in the second half, only scored the 79, but had the 36% CBA. So what I've done is I've looked at all the games last year that he played at least 30% CBAs, which there were 8, and he had an average of 95.3. So that's over 20 points of upside based on what he's priced at of 79. So, and if we were to take away the games where he had less than 50% CBAs, that average bumps up to 103.2. So that is a pretty significant jump. Obviously, 6 games, limited sample size, but we have seen in those games that he can rack up the marks, can rack up the tackles, and they're the players that we like, right? The Josh Dunkleys, the Marcus Bontempellis, the Jordan Dawsons. Yes, I've got Jordan Dawson in again for the episode. Those players where they rack up the marks and tackles as well as the disposals, that's what builds this fantasy game, and that's what we love to see. And Miles Bergman can be that player, particularly as Port don't have another midfielder really like him as that defensive-minded midfielder that can sort of play on the outside as well and get his own ball. So very much in the similar mold to a Josh Dunkley, where he can sort of do a similar job for Port. They've got Zach Butters, who is their Rolls Royce. He does everything in there. Then you've obviously got a Willem Drew, who's a good team player, sort of in and under player, can be a little bit defensive as well, but maybe they're looking for other guys to go through there. Maybe it's a Jason Horne-Francis, limited start to the season, what we're hearing, but he's that mid-forward sort of bull of a player. And then you've got Connor Rozee, who will sort of chop and change between mid and defence, probably a lot more half-back, and then changing into the midfield. Then Will Brodie, where does he sit? Does he come into the team? But again, he's a little bit more like Willem Drew, sort of in and under, can get the hard ball. So I think Bergman's got the spot in there. The only flag that I didn't like, Warnie, I want to ask you about this, was the interview that he had with Channel 7. And normally if it's other players talking about other players, I'm like, okay, that's good to hear, but I'll wait to see it. But when it's coming from the actual player himself saying that he's unsure of his role and we're about a month away from the year, that was a bit of a flag. But then we're hearing in Pracky in Match Sim that he's playing midfield and looking good. So is he giving us a bit of a bluff and telling us a bit of a fib that he's not sure and he is sure? Or is he genuinely unsure and we're sort of not sort of quite sure on what the role's going to be? And it gives me a bit of Harry Perryman vibes if that's going to be what it's going to be. So is that a concern for you with Miles Bergman? We did see it in games last year where he did sort of just change position. So is that a concern for you?
I guess it is, because we've got also that Mr. Fix-It vibes about him. He'll do what he needs to do, and I think we have seen that in his career, that he has been thrown about or had to do, the best thing for the team as such. And that's probably the reason why, in this battle, I've got Colby ahead, because I feel like that role is a bit more secure in what we're going to see. Those numbers for Bergman are awesome. If he can be doing that and running through the guts, doing his thing, it's just going to be, like he says, he's unsure. Maybe he's foxing a little bit there. And, I think everyone's all media trained into talking on saying the right thing. But they were interesting comments, because he does know that he's going to have to play different roles during the year. And even to the point, though, I think this is why he's a good starting pick. I think he's going to be needed in that midfield role. I think that's where it is, and we can assess things after our first month or so. We get a couple of weeks without Ollie Wines if Horn-France is underdone there and having to play a bit more forward, which is probably the likely thing for him to begin with. That's what it is. It is going to be that worry, though, that it is a forward role for him, if that is like a secondary position, and what he might need to switch and do, which has obviously sounded like that's been part of his training. That's been part of what could be in the 2026 version of a Miles Bergman. So, yeah, it is. It's a concern, but I'm probably a little, I'm not as worried to begin the season. It's going to be one of those things. I feel like we're all going to have some different stories with Bergman at the time that we may have jumped off him is almost like the thing. And we see that with some of those mid-price players during the year that, you might just hold on to someone. It might be a really good idea to, pick a Sam Taylor at the start of the season or something like that, Bales, and then the week that you should have got off him, and then when you needed to do it, and then you get stuck. And that's the thing. So I'm not saying Bergman's going to be like that, but I did just want to bring up Sam Taylor because I was on the same boat with you as well, mate.
Yeah. But the only thing is you're not haunted by that, the head on the stick that's in my room all the time. So I'm always haunted by that. But I think the good thing about Bergman is that absolute worst case, he plays a bit of forward. He's got the fixtures, and I know Calvin, he smiles every time he hears this, the green mile that Port have got on the scale of hardness being North Melbourne, Essendon, West Coast, and Richmond. And you can even add St Kilda a bit to that list as well. But those first 4 games are as good as you could possibly get. The ones that you want to have to start the year. And that's why we're keen on a Zach Butters and a Connor Rosie and even maybe a Todd Marshall, Will Brody, those cheaper guys there. But you did mention the one player that I knew I was forgetting, one midfielder from Port, but Ollie Wines obviously suspended for the first 2 weeks. That just opens up the door as well. As you say, Jason Horne-Francis limited probably to start the year being a bit more forward. I just see Miles Bergman playing forward. And as long as he can get off to a good start, average well, if he goes forward, we can trade him out. And he's made his cash. He's scored well for us in those good matchups, hopefully. And we trade him to, maybe it's a Nasai Wanganeen-Miller in round 6, round 7 if he comes down in price. Maybe it's a Lockie Whitfield if he didn't start him. So there's guys there that you can easily pivot to because he's at a decent price and will hopefully make that cash as well. So that's really what we're hoping for with Miles Bergman. I'm actually interested to see, because I didn't actually have a look at it. What was his average if you take out that? If you take out the game and it was, if you go 60% or more CBA, his average bumps up to 106. So you want to keep cherry picking those stats. It's a massive average. So you could arguably say that his upside in general is maybe slightly higher than Colby, because if he's got that midfield role, he probably can average those triple figures and go towards 105 as shown if he gets over 60%. But I think if we're choosing Warnie, are you going towards your Tassie boy? You're going towards Colby with the safety and security of that role?
I am. I think so. If I did have to choose, like at the moment, I think both are very viable starting picks for us. Colby's just got him for me. And the other little thing I just wanted to add on there as well, and it's a little bit like that trading thing. Do we see both of these as keepers? Yep, in that perfect world, it'd be nice for them to be, top of the line and that sort of stuff. But they're probably borderline. We might say top 10 is their best that they might be with what we see. The mid-season buy, they've got the first one, so the round 12, they're both on it. And that's one of those things that might be that little bit of a concern, considering you've got those other players on that buy as well. You've got your 2 other Port boys that are almost definitely our top of the line players in Butters and Rosie, who are very popular, and probably at that point in the season, you'll want to have both of them in your side. Sheasel, of course, there, North Melbourne, but they share that also with Adelaide. And, by then we all want our Dorse, don't we, at that point? And the Suns too. Who knows what that might be looking like, but obviously Petrarca would be one that we would be considering as a top of the line forward. So there will be a few names floating around there in that, and maybe one of your Colby or Bergman are gone by that time. But if they're both pushing along and, if they're hitting that 95 plus, you're probably unlikely to be trading them out then. And I think for me, in my head, if you were playing almost that safe game of that, I think things can change easier for Bergman. And it's just that safety of role for Colby that gets him my little nod there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I'd go Colby as well, just ahead. I think, as I said before, I think Bergman's upside is a tiny bit more, but the security of McKercher's role is there. I feel like there is a world where both of these players could be in different roles by the time the mid-season buy comes around. Like the North go, we're losing these games. Let's get Colby onto a wing. Let's get him into the guts. Let's get him a bit more up the ground. There's a world there, but I think it'd be silly if they moved in there just with the run that he gives and the good ball use out of halfback. And same with Bergman, the play that he gives them in the midfield is different, as I said, to all those other players. I think he's the sort of guy that could be almost, I think he's a better player, but like the Ned Long to Nick Dacos could be almost a protector of Zach Butters, because I feel like Zach Butters last year just sort of didn't really get a lot of help in there, and especially with those games against Mullen there was one other game he didn't go too well in as well, but he got tagged and no one really helped him. Whereas I feel like Bergman can be that guy that can do a job, but also help protect Butters. So I think both are very good picks. And do you currently have both in your side? Obviously, here I think you got Colby, but you've got Bergman at the moment as well.
Yeah, I do have both there at the moment, and that's going to be a position or a line though that does evolve a little bit, I think, this preseason as well, because as we like to call out, the rookies dictate your structure, and we may end up with sort of the defenders that may force our hand to change up some structure that we might have initially been thinking. So yeah, I guess it's a wait and see at this stage, but yeah, I think at this stage, you've probably got a couple of guys that are priced in that range in your side, and those two are both there for me at the moment. And, you know, we mentioned before, we might have had a Tom McCarthy in this sort of range and stuff as well, because there's a couple of others that you could be considering around this price as well.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got both as currently in my team as well. But yeah, as you say, Tom McCarthy's there, Sam Banks is there, Nick Newman's there. And you've even got some other guys like Kitty Coleman, Jath, guys a little bit cheaper than that. So there's a lot of these value defenders that we're looking at, but then that's where all the rookies are also looking like they're going to be. So we probably need a few extra defender slots this year, or maybe chuck a Rosie or a Zeke Yuland in your midfield potentially to fit fill these guys in might be where we're looking at. But that is the first head-to-head battle in the book. So Warnie, thank you very much for jumping on once again for the first episode of the series. I'm sure everyone is already following you, but where can they find you across socials, and where can they find the podcast? And also DT Talk has got some good things going through at the moment. I was able to jump on one of those pods as well.
Yeah, I've been having a great preseason at Warnie DT on X, but I've also started up an Instagram page. I thought I'd have a little bit of a go, a bit more of a personal Warn Dogs one, where just different things of my fantasy season, what that's going to look like. So you can check that out on Insta. But yeah, DT Talk, had this podcast series going of, chatting to someone for each club, someone who's been part of the DT Talk journey, which has been a lot of fun. So you can go and check out the back catalogue of those wherever you get your podcasts, or at dreamteamtalk.com. But also, Bales will be catching up with you in April for Gather Round. So April 10 on the Friday afternoon, we'll be in Adelaide before the footy doing a bit of a show. So you can check out those details at dreamteamtalk.com as well. Hopefully people get along with that, and if you're in Perth, which I know a lot of our fantasy fans are from there, we'll be there at the end of April as well, so April 29, and so we'll be doing that. So we're looking forward to it this year. It's been this is our 20th season, so it has been a massive journey for us for DT Talk, and we're pretty keen to celebrate in the best way.
Yeah, no, looking forward to it. Gather Round is always my favourite weekend of the year when everyone comes to Adelaide, get all the games at Adelaide, but it's obviously even better with you boys coming over this year and doing a show on the Friday. So make sure you do head over. Where's the location for that as well, if people want to know where that is?
So at the Elephant, not too far from the ground. We were there a couple of years ago when Hef put on a great show. So we're looking forward to seeing what we can do, and it should be pretty fun because it's just great getting like-minded people together. I think anytime there's been any form of a fantasy catch-up, it has been bloody fun, and I think everyone enjoys themselves, and you're always you're not short of any form of conversation, I don't think, when you're around players. We would have had it being a Friday. You had the night before, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of issues by round 5 for all of us to be thinking about. So even for the show and stuff, we've got a few things planned already for it. We're going, we do know that content writes itself every single week because there's always going to be an issue.
Exactly right. And if you want tickets as well, as Warnie said, go to DT Talk, head to one of the boys' Twitter profiles, anywhere. Pretty easy to find tickets. So make sure you grab your tickets and catch the boys. And I'll be there along with, I know Jake and a heap of other legends will be there as well. So make sure you guys head along. You can find me at BAILSDT across the socials, and us at AFL Fantasy Fans on X. We'll be back on Wednesday for another head-to-head episode with another special guest, as always. But if you did enjoy it, make sure you like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, 5-star rating and review on Spotify or Apple. And let us know in the comments as well who you'd pick between the two of Colby McKercher and Miles Bergman. And if you have got either or? You've got both, or are you fading both? Are you going a bit spicy and fading both? That'd be interesting to see if anyone is doing that. But let us know in the comments. But we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks, everyone. See ya.